the Global South, Skilling for Opportunity and Social Mobility. And we have a very exciting panel for you. My name is Abhineet. I'm Vice President with Access Partnership. And our panel includes, obviously, I'll start from there, Nana, who is the CEO of AVPN. She obviously has done a lot of work since 2013, has mobilized financial, human, and intellectual capital to drive equitable development outcomes and inclusive growth across Asia. To her next, we have Anjali, who is Anjali is a senior associate with the India and Emerging Asia program as CSIS, with expertise in technology-enabled development and inclusive growth. To her next, I have Chenny. Chenny Yoon is Public Affairs Lead for Government Affairs and Public Policy at Google Asia Pacific, based in Singapore. And she spearheads strategic engagement with policymakers and public sector stakeholders. And finally, we have Angelica. Angelica Salvi del Perro is a senior advisor to the OECD's Director for Employment, Labor, and Social Affairs, where she leads the work on the ethics of AI adoption in the workplace, and the OECD project on AI in work, innovation, productivity, and skills, which is really a mouthful, a lot of work. So as you can see, we have a very interesting panel for you today. Now, we all talk about AI adoption. You would have heard panels since morning talking about AI adoption. The key question is, there's been a lot of focus on AI adoption. Most of you use AI in some way or form. However, what research shows, what studies show, there are two important aspects. One, the gap between global north and global south in terms of AI adoption is massive. At least 2x more in global north as compared to AI adoption in global north is 2 times larger than AI adoption in global south. Number two, AI skilling programs has actually been a wave behind for AI adoption. So there's a lot of AI adoption happening, but most of the companies we talk to, most of the companies you will see in research, actually talk about the fact that they can't find the right talent. They don't have the right people right now who understand AI from a lot of aspects, right? It's not about just engineering, but the ethics, the implementation, the literacy aspect of it, which is what we'll talk about today, looking at this. On top of it, obviously, AI has the propensity to exacerbate the inequalities, whether it's gender inequalities, whether it's in digital divide, so on and so forth, if not implemented and adopted in the right way. A lot of research we have done, for example, we see female employees are using or are talking about AI as a generational opportunity to uplift themselves in their careers and break the glass ceiling. We see that across a lot of different markets, right? However, are there the right opportunities? Do we have the scaling opportunities for them to do that? So that's, again, another area we'll talk about today. India obviously has a lot of policy leadership. That's why we have the Impact Summit here. The IndiaAI mission launched in 2024, the Shram Shakti Niti 2025, obviously on the labor side, which not only looks at it from a micro enterprise level skilling, but also from a macro labor market dynamic as well, which is another thing. The fact that if you don't know what the challenges or where the gaps are, if it's not measured, you actually don't know what to solve for. DPI approach, for example, you would have heard a lot of sessions since morning. We have talked to a lot of people recently outside the rooms as well, looking at how India's approach to DPI to AI development is very unique, something which can easily be adopted throughout the world. But that also comes with the fact that how do we ensure that the other countries are able to uplift their skilling and initiatives as well. And the Viksit India 2047, which is obviously the big macro mission we all have here in this room. To do that, I wanted to introduce this AI for All Workforce Scaling Policy Toolkit. And you can use the QR code, download the thing, have a read. But essentially what it does is to guide the design and development of AI skilling initiatives for broad-based participation. When you look at it, it's something which is very, very common sense. You identify the needs, the skills needed for AI, easier said than done. We don't even know which skills are required because we don't know which task is AI coming from. So there's a lot of analysis and stuff which is required there. Talk about, once you know what to measure or what skills are you talking about, where the gaps are. Again, very easy said and done, but nobody responds to survey anymore. So how do we actually do that? So that's the other part. We talk about, so
once you know the gaps, what are the implementation, how do we implement a workforce skilling roadmap? So that's another thing which the toolkit talks about. And finally, how do you monitor and evaluate progress? So it becomes a very iterative process. I leave that at the back end, so anybody wants to download the QR code, happy to do that. So what we'll talk about over the next 44 minutes, as per my clock, are a few different areas. Maybe I'll start with generally talking about the government and multilateral perspective on workforce readiness. And maybe I'll start with you, Angelica. In your work on analysis of labor markets, what are the most pressing emerging AI-related skill gaps that you see both globally and across the global south?
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today. So I would say that skills are going to be one decisive factor for workers and employers in their opportunities to benefit from the adoption of AI. There are three main findings from our work that I want to bring here today. One is that a lack of skills is holding back the adoption of AI. Two, that AI is obviously changing the type of skills that employers are looking for, and I'll talk about that in more detail. And then three, that training is becoming the most important lever to give employers and workers the opportunity to use AI and benefit from it. So taking one point at a time, the first on lack of skills being a barrier to AI adoption. In our surveys, we see, for example, that we did a survey of manufacturing and finance firms at the end of 2022. 40% of them said they couldn't adopt AI because they didn't have the skills in their workforce that they needed. And in a survey of SMEs that we did last year in 2025, 50% of the SMEs are saying this. In terms of the second point, so the change in skills needs, we find that AI is really raising the bar for skills. Employment has grown faster in the jobs and occupations that are most exposed to AI. And these are jobs where AI tends to complement workers, so therefore the demand for these skills increases. And this, so the overall, this is a trend, right? That we are requiring more highly educated workers than before. And the third key message is about the need for policy to be the pipeline of high-skilled workers. And this is, and importantly, not all about coding or AI specialists. That's only about 1% of the workforce. We need to think about all of the rest of the workers that are going to be needing to know how to use AI. So these are skills about understanding data, analyzing it, but also applying really AI tools to their own jobs in the various specifications they have, and then understanding the limitations and potentials of these tools. And so to conclude rapidly, basically investing in retraining and upskilling is going to be the challenge really for policymakers. And these investments are already paying off. We find that about half of the workers say in the surveys we did that they are receiving training from their employers. And when they do, they have better outcomes in terms of the impact of AI on the quality of their jobs and on their performance. So what does it mean? Well, it means, first of all, doing training in the topics that matter, as we said, but also doing it in a more modular and flexible way so that people can do it throughout their lives. And in ways that are less attached to the specific job contract they have. So what I'm getting here at is training needs to be available for temporary workers, workers in the informal sector, platform workers, not just full-time employees, as it tends to be right now. And then a last point on the recognition of qualifications. So especially when you think about microcredits, these credits need to be easily certified and acknowledged by potential employers so that these skills that are gained can be then used to find other jobs, both in the country and across. So this collaboration across countries is really important. And it's what's going to give countries, especially those in the global south, an opportunity to move from up the AI chain, from low value added AI jobs and activities to higher value add ones. Thank you.
I think you raised some very interesting points. I think the platform workers is an important one. We do keep talking a lot about the white collar jobs, but AI isn't just coming for them. AI is coming for a lot of other jobs as well. I think you also talked about the importance of the role of employer-employees contract or the social compact between them to understand what's the role for each of the parties there. Jenny, maybe I'll come to you. There's a lot of focus on the fact that the labor impact of AI is very nuanced, right? Some studies say 40% of the jobs, global jobs, will be enhanced, transformed, displaced by AI. Some studies say no, people with AI skills will displace people without AI skills, which is, the new thing these days. In your experience, where do you see, which roles do you see are transforming the greatest, and which areas you think will require the greatest mitigation interventions?
Great. Thank you, Abini. So I take that as a sort of the future work framework. Very nice to meet you, everyone. My name is Chenny. Before I give my official answer, I'm going off script. I have one comment, one question. My first comment is that I purposefully dress green. It's always a delight to come back to Delhi. And then I thought that I needed to add orange. So green and orange. Love coming back to Delhi. My first time, thank you, in Bharat Mandapam. And I want to thank all of you for coming here, taking the time to listen to some of these conversations on the latest on the deployment and development of AI. So thank you for that. And my question is, do you all use AI products every day? I use Gemini, or for that matter, any other AI products. So if you're nodding to this question, I think you're doing a great job. You are actually on the front line of people who are on this AI race, who are thinking about what does the future work mean to me. And I've been in this private tech sector for 8 years now. And when I think about my parents, I'm originally from Korea. I'm based out of Singapore. I'm working at the Google Asia Pacific headquarters. And so my parents, they were born in the 1950s. And whenever my father asks me, so what do you do? And I tell him what I do. And you realize, so this job that I have didn't exist in my parents' generation. And when I think about my own children, 20 years down the road, they probably have something that I may not be able to imagine today. So that is where we are at this critical trajectory of AI and for all, and the positive impact as this summit is looking to address. And Abhinay, to your question, I think at the end of the day, there is what we call this quote-unquote human in the loop. So even if you're using AI chatbot, if you want to augment your skills, and etc., there's always this human element, right? You need to have the critical thinking skills. You need to have creativity. You have to have that human touch at the end of the day. You are not just taking whatever output that you're getting out of Gemini verbatim, right? You have to think about what does that mean for us or mean for my employer. So that is very critical. And I think the only thing that is constant is the change that we have. If we had this summit, say, a year ago, probably the conversation was slightly different. And then from here now, when I think about February 2027, I cannot even imagine where we will be at, say, a year from now. And to the point, Abhinay, I think the future of work, how we are upskilling our the future generation, or even including current generation. I think just look at this room. We have representative from the international organization, from the private sector, from think tank, from the philanthropic sector. I think making the bridge amongst the sectors, talking to the government, showing up with the government stakeholders, putting our heads together to think about, yes, how do we then upskill, as Angelica pointed out, some rural population, ASHA workers, in India, for example, how we make sure that, as the India government has so rightly pointed out, this benefits all of us, right? This isn't just a conversation for, global north, global south. So that's why we're here. So I'll add my first answer.
Welcome to India, Jenny. This is my first time in Bharat Mandapam as well, and I also dressed up in white just for the colors. Anjali, moving on to you. In one of your commentaries, which you had written last year, you talked about how 54% of South Asian youth lack skills for decent jobs, which could erode labor advantage. We do talk about the demographic dividend for most of the global South countries, in South Asia included. How do you see the reality shaping AI skilling priorities in global South?
Great. Thank you again, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. When I wrote this piece a few months back, leading up to the AI Summit, I was really thinking about how we reframe this statistic of 54%, right? This is not simply a skills gap, it's really a systems mismatch. And this is also really obvious by looking around you at the AI Summit and how many youth you see attending this summit, even just on the first day. And across South Asia and much of the global South, millions of young people are entering labor markets that were already struggling to absorb them, even before AI began reshaping entry-level work. So what does that tell us? It tells us that our response must reflect three structural realities. And this is really about high informality that we're seeing, the labor mobility, and institutional capacity. That these are all framing constraints that we're facing in order to be able to capture the labor market that's shifting, but also the young people that are looking for jobs in this shifting environment. So let's first look at foundational AI literacy at scale, which we really truly see as a key component here. And this, I'm not talking about advanced coding, I'm not talking about elite boot camps, none of this, but really short, modular, mobile-first programs in local languages that teach workers how to use AI tools safely and productively in their existing sectors, right? So this is portable, stackable credentials that any worker can take with them, not the employer, and because we recognize that labor mobility is high. But we also need to be realistic, right? In informal economies, AI adoption will not primarily happen through classroom training. It will happen through embedded tools. And so those are tools that people are using every single day. That's things like AI built into WhatsApp business tools. It's helping small vendors share customer messages. It's AI embedded in digital payment apps that we know exist across India that track sales trends and suggest inventory levels. Or AI crop advisory systems delivering localized farmer guidance. So for many informal workers, AI will function as infrastructure, not as a standalone product. And I think that's really important for us to recognize. And the worker is not going to be learning AI, for instance. They will use a tool that quietly improves pricing, inventory management, logistics, or credit access, for example. The next piece we need to think about is productivity-focused skilling. And so what I mean by that is 70 to 80% of employment in the global South is in micro or small medium enterprises. And so in these sectors, displaced workers will be entering them and intensify competition and compress incomes. So we need to be prepared for that. So AI skilling needs to be paired with tool adoption specifically through partnerships with different kinds of financial tech platforms, agri-tech startups, different types of software providers for small and medium enterprises. And governments need to be enabling adoption through co-financing a lot of this, through regulatory clarity, through integration with digital public infrastructure. And then lastly, we need to think about institutional agility. So vocational systems like the ones that exist in India, like the ITIs, they need to be adopted and adapted for what's to come. Right now, what exists with ITIs is really meant for slower industrial cycles. It is not meant for where AI is right now. So we need an annual skill gap review. We need to think about instructors retraining their skills every 18 months. And so this is where I really see AVPN's AI Workforce Skilling Policy Toolkit stepping in, because their emphasis on contextualized sector strategies and agile review cycles is really going to be able to show us how we translate these types of frameworks into measurable income mobility on the ground. And so I feel like with embedded low friction adoption models and institutional reform, AI can actually raise productivity and income resilience. And so that's the policy choice in front of all of us.
Thanks, Anjali. Nana, coming to you, we hear both sides of the equation. We hear from the students that they don't know what to learn because there's obviously a lot of stuff happening. So a lot of them are going either for vocational training or for hard sciences, for example. And also on the employer side, they don't know where to start, right? And I believe obviously the toolkit is a good starting point for a lot of folks. But from your perspective as, you know, you have deep networks across philanthropy, social investments, private sector ecosystem development. How do you see the role in linking governments, NGOs, all of these things? How do you think the skilling initiatives can effectively reach underserved communities and or obviously medium and micro and small medium enterprises?
Thanks, Abhineet. So I think, you know, what the speakers before me have said are very true. We need to look at how do we reach the most marginalized, the ones who are most affected. How do we actually embed these tools? How do we actually really look at, well, you know, really interesting that all of you in this room are using AI tools right now, as Shani did a dipstick test. But I think for us, especially given that we're sitting here in India, we need to be figuring out how AI skilling is really reaching those that are not sitting in this room. And that's where, you know, the workforce will come from. That's where the economy will grow from. And that is very much an ecosystem approach. It's not really one thing followed by another thing, followed by another thing. The other thing we have to be very clear of, especially in markets like India, is that we scale what works locally, not what looks good globally. I think that is very, very important. So for us, in order to do that, we have, you know, we've launched this policy toolkit, which please do scan the QR code. Please tell us what you think of it. But it's been really great. We have a partnership with Google, with the with the Asian Development Bank, and we are doing this AI Opportunity Fund. We're in phase 2 right now, which really is looking at working with organizations across the ground to reach those who are left out, who are not in the conversation right now in this room. And I think that's where, you know, Anjali said this, I think Shani said this, I think Angelika also said this, is that it's important that we work with workers, with MSMEs, and actually with women. So we did an AI landscape mapping across Asia, and actually less than 10% of the AI technology even reaches women. So I think, you know, having a gender lens is crucial. So not just looking at the most marginalized, not just looking at workers, but also looking at women and how do we actually reach women. As I said, I think for us, everything starts on the ground. How do you actually listen to people on the ground and figure out what is it that they need to do? How do we actually keep gathering feedback and real life stories and look at training that will actually reach them? So one example I have through our AI Opportunity Fund is actually working with one of our local training providers, People's Action for Development, or PAD, who went straight to the rural villages and actually delivered fully offline face-to-face training. So we're talking about AI skilling, but we delivered this training completely offline, which is actually very important when you think about it, when you want to remove access barriers and you want to build confidence in communities who are starting out with very low digital literacy. So the result, more than 4,000 villagers actually completed their training, and they actually used AI tools like Gemini. So they're now able to do voice-based inquiry with local language to get practical information on farming, on weather, on government schemes, health, and everyday problem solving. So that's a local solution that works. That's how you actually really get AI to work for people, to get AI to actually, AI tools, as you said, Anjali, to get them embedded in local communities. And I think it's important that we also look at working with policymakers. I think, Angelika, you referred to that, and especially in countries like India. So I think for us at AVPN, it's looking at an entire ecosystem approach.
Yeah. No, I think great point, Nara. I think you touched the point about gender, that we need to have gender, minority. I think all of that has to be inbuilt in the design process. A lot of our research, typically, which we have done, says that women are less likely to use chatbots as compared to men. They obviously are a lot less represented in STEM-related education as well. However,
in countries where there's a massive disparity between male and female employment, we see women much more likely or much more keener to use or learn about AI scaling. Countries like India, Saudi Arabia, for example, Japan, Korea, for example, we see there's a lot more interest to learn about AI. So I think that has to be built into the design stage as well. Maybe on the same point, I'll come to you, maybe Angelica. How do you see for let's say if we have to build on that, how important are non-traditional pathways? I think you talked about micro-credentials, for example, in bringing more women into the AI-enabled roles. Yeah.
Well, so I think that in terms of training and lifelong learning, women are not less likely to participate in these programs than men. The differences are in the topics. So again, going back to the importance of making this training not about becoming an AI specialist, if that's not exactly what we want to get out, but how to use these tools in your own job so that they're useful. And you know, in that sense, we have a lot of access because women do participate in training. We just need to make it not sound as if we're trying to make coders out of them, if that's not what we want, right? And then also in the workplace, because what we see from our evidence is that, well, there's an issue there that's sort of structural, meaning that women are in jobs that are less likely to be highly exposed to AI. So they have less need and opportunity to use AI tools. But as these generative tools become more embedded, as we were saying, that will not be even an issue. So it's just a matter of, you know, making it a day-to-day thing.
Anjali, I'll come to you. I think we did talk about MSMEs as well. The skills needed for larger companies are more tailored towards software development. We were talking about this outside as well, engineering skills. Whereas for a lot of smaller companies, they are looking more towards application-based skills. A one-size-fit-all doesn't necessarily work. So how would skilling initiative approach these differences?
Sorry. I want to just address, you know, whether it be MSMEs or women in these spaces, as we think about how to be able to reach them, I want to just focus on intentional design. What does that look like, right? How do you reach people where they are right now? So we can talk about embedding AI into structures and infrastructure that they use, but also we need to figure out where the people are that we're missing, right? And Nana raised this. It's not all of you in the room because we're not missing you and you're going to figure out how to get there. You figured out how to get into the AI Summit and use a QR code, right? But how do we think about where these people are and especially where women are as they grow in force in MSMEs? And these are 4 places where I think that we could use institutional design. And that's 1, delivering the tools through self-help groups and cooperatives. We see this is an age-old program that continues to work. We find women and micro and small enterprises focusing and working through these cooperatives and self-help groups from the most local village level to the districts, and they're effective, they're community driven, and they've got a localized context in addressing problems and solutions, right? Second is using the voice interface rather than text-heavy apps. That is the best way to be able to remove these barriers. We know that using local languages and using technology with voice-based, which is so accessible right now, seems to be effective. So why not have more tools in this medium? Third, track gender disaggregated income changes. That is going to tell you the shifts that are happening across these sectors. And it's going to tell you across micro and small medium enterprises what's functioning and what's not. Where should AI tools be inserted? Where is there a need and what is actually not progressing? You can be able to see that through labor data, which we're going to talk through more later. Within a year, you can address where the income changes are happening and how AIs help that productivity. And then lastly, align the AI tool access with microfinance networks. These are not old school ideas. Microfinance networks are still alive and kicking, and women are driving these changes, and micro and small and medium enterprises rely on them still, and they're effective. So how do we think about this intentional design so that we don't let the AI widen the gap even further?
Great points, Anjali. Chenny, I'll come to you now. From a private sector perspective, what are the top 2-3 emerging AI capabilities and workforce shifts that you are seeing globally? And how can cross-sector partnerships effectively accelerate AI adoption and economic opportunities in the global south?
Thank you. So I think in terms of the cross-sector partnership, I mean, I alluded to a little bit about, just look at this panel. And also, if you look at the gender ratio, we're very happy. We have all women panel. So I actually want to go back to the AI Opportunity Fund, Naina. So for those who are a little less familiar with what she introduced earlier, so this is AI Opportunity Fund with the support from Google, the Asian Development Bank. Our partner ABPN is rolling out this skilling initiative. This is not just India, across the entire Asia Pacific region. A total of 27 million US dollars. And I'm very happy to share that just India only, we are now looking at 174,000 beneficiary. So meaning this is reaching, yes, the rural communities, relatively sort of less familiar with the latest, AI adoption. So we are very proud of that. And one thing also, Abhinit, I forgot to answer your question earlier about this fear that people have that, oh, wow, AI will replace my job. And I do get this question probably everywhere I go across the region. But oftentimes I say, AI will not replace your job, but probably somebody who knows how to use AI might. So there's a lot of food for thought when you think about, you are not competing against AI. AI is augmenting your capabilities, right? Basically, if you have a cell phone, and also if you have been using Google products probably in the last decade, AI is already part of your life, right? So whether you use Gmail, Google Maps, so the first app that I opened when I land, the airports, Google Maps, Gemini, obviously. So I think that gives us a bit of perspective. And also I like giving real life examples if it's helpful for the people here to basically draw the picture. So this is live testimonial, college students majoring in cinema and filming. And then they say, if I have the freedom to talk about more Google products, they say, hey, Chenny, we used Gemini and VO3, which is a video creating tool. And with just a couple $100, they were able to create this short film, which was created entirely by AI. And they were referring to how that actually removed the barrier to entry. If they didn't have this support from AI, it probably would have cost them an entire professional studio, staff to actually film the movie, and also the actors to be in the movie, and etc. So they did say, thanks to AI, so these are like college students. As I speak, they say the barrier to entry doesn't exist anymore. So I think this is a great example of how people are, there isn't like a traditional or one fixed idea of AI upskilling. We hear all of these different sets of testimonials from students, in their 20s, how they are actually going out of their traditional way of how will AI help my job hunting, for example, or my career growth. So these are some of the live examples.
I think I won't mind AI taking some part of my job. Or it would have made the food ordering process more efficient. I would have definitely loved that. Before I come to you, Nana, quick question. I think we did have, like, most of you use AI. How many of you actually find AI saves you time? And how many of you think that you're spending less time in office because of that? Okay, see? Well, which basically means that you are doing more revenue, so it's good for productivity. But if you are saving time, please use that time to learn more AI skills. That should be the important aspect. But Nana, coming back to you, from your experience, what are some effective strategies for designing AI skilling initiatives, as you said, that are locally relevant and can reach underserved communities in Global South? I think you talked about some of them, so I'm just trying to think, how do we align all of that?
So I think Abhinit, just based on the question that you asked, I think, that's where the AI skilling is really important. The majority of this room put up their hand where they felt that AI actually saves you time, or you use it regularly and you find it efficient. But I think there were just 4 hands that went up that said it doesn't really make you spend less time in the office. And I think that's the telling example. I think the skilling needs to be very much tailored and very specific to what is it, the problem that you're trying to solve. And that's what we've done with our AI Opportunity Fund Phase 2. So Phase 1 was basically a train the trainer model. And we went ahead to say, let's train all these trainers who can reach the last mile, who can reach those people who are not here. But when we did Phase 2, we actually went a little bit deeper, used the learnings from Phase 1, and then designed Phase 2 to be much more efficient, which was really looking at how do we empower these training providers to design their programs based on what we learned, which is what we learned today, that yes, everyone uses AI, but it doesn't make you more efficient at work. So our local training provider in India, for example, in Gujarat, Junior Achievement India Services, trained more than 52,000 workers. It was a 15-hour curriculum delivered in person with a 2 to 3 day sort of in-person model. And what was the differentiator? The differentiator was relevance. The curriculum was sector specific and designed for businesses like food processing, beauticians, and micro entrepreneurs who had, so it had practical outputs like how do you produce a logo? How do I actually produce a price list? How do I actually use AI to help me with packaging and with promotions? Tools that the businesses already used became the gateway, and as Anjali said, it was voice-based. So voice-based AI in Gujarati, which made AI accessible for the first-time users, and I'm sure if they were in the room, they would actually tell you that the time that they spent doing their work was less, I hope at least.
Which basically means that you are doing more valuable stuff as you go along, right? So that's obviously the hope, or you are spending the time learning more AI skills and not watching Netflix. So that's ideal situation. Anjali, coming to you, you did talk about the labor data aspect, right? So in your analysis of AI and the global south, what are the biggest blind spots in existing labor data that risk distorting AI skilling priorities?
Great. I don't know how many people pay attention to labor data. I don't know if it's relevant to you. I don't know if you look at it based on what you see produced annually. But when I started looking at it, I started seeing that our labor data globally, especially in the global south, was built for industrial era economies, right? So what I'm trying to say is that AI changes tasks rapidly, sometimes quarterly, but most countries track employment annually by broad sectors. And so what I'm seeing is that there are three major blind spots in labor. The first is the informal sector invisibility, right? So in many global south economies, most workers are informal, yet they lack real-time productivity and AI adoption data in micro and small medium enterprises. Second, what we've spoken about a bit today is the gender invisibility. So women's unpaid care work, we know, all should know about this by now. We've been talking about it for decades, but their home-based production and agricultural labor are still often undercounted. And then third, it's the outcome distortion. So systems track enrollment and certification, but they rarely 6 to 12 month income mobility is tracked or employment stability is being tracked, right? So the question is, given these factors, how do we fix this in low capacity countries? Because many people in the room will tell me, great, these are big problems. How do we actually do this? We could do this in the US. But we don't start with national AI-powered labor dashboards. We start incrementally. And I really think this is where change can be created. So let's think about sector pilots. For example, in agriculture, partner with an agri-tech platform to track adoption and yield changes among participating farmers. I know in India we have so many apps for farmers right now, and so many different apps. Get your crop here, go based on this temperature. But imagine an AI functioning app for a group of people that would depend on it so holistically that could actually change productivity, right? So second, leverage the existing digital rails. Things like mobile bunny platforms, super successful in India, but also across South Asia as India takes this platform to other global South economies. and use the digital payment systems to generate transaction level data that can indicate income patterns without new bureaucracies. And then lastly, require skilling programs to track income change. And that's really, looking at follow-ups at 6 and 12 months, which can provide better insight than enrollment statistics alone. And then structure annual industry consultations, right? So my idea that I'm trying to say is start small, use existing platforms, track income outcomes, and institutionalize one review cycle per year. And then with that, what you'll get is data systems will mature, policies going to assume imperfect information and design for adaptability. The reason why I stress this so much is that you're not going to see the impact of AI on labor and on income unless you start tracking it effectively. And so it's really essential, especially for the informal sector.
And I think that's a point you also raised out earlier, Angelica. I think these are all valid points. I'm just wondering from a traditional labor market information, obviously they're not useful enough. We just came up with a report last month at Davos, which talked about that, how our labor systems are not useful in the age of AI, and how AI can also augment how do we track labor data. So from your perspective, what do you think are the minimum data and indicators that governments in Global South should prioritize to steer AI skilling policy responsibly?
So we do a lot of work on labor market information systems, not just producing statistics on the labor market, but helping countries set up systems to track the evolution of the labor market. One of the key findings that we have is that mixing quantitative and qualitative data really helps use the data for policy making, because it's true we don't have a lot of data, the data that we have is not perfect, but it's even worse that the data that we do have is not really used fully to inform policy making. There are delays, it's all ex post, it doesn't help fixing things that are coming up. So this mix of quantitative and qualitative really helps. Quantitative will help measure emerging needs, and qualitative instead helps have a 360 understanding of the challenges, really more granular feeling of what the issues are, and promote collaboration with across stakeholders, so policymakers, employers, trade unions, and training providers. Many countries are moving towards using online job vacancies to understand how the labor markets are evolving. And this data is granular, it's timely. Actually, like by using AI itself, you should be analyzing that. But just because of what I just said, it's also data that is expensive, both in terms of the amount of financing, the money that you need to get it and process it, and the human skills, the human capital that you need to process it. On top of that, for countries with large informal markets, they're not very representative of the situation of their labor market. So they need to be complemented, especially in Global South, by qualitative data, and it's already quite a lot of activities that's happening in this sense.
No, I think those are fair points. In fact, one of our recommendations in that paper was also talking about how we could use twins or labor data twins to sort of actively, regularly manage how the actual labor market is changing. So that's obviously something AI can augment labor data collection as well. Chenny, coming to you, and don't worry, I won't talk about labor data to you, but how do you suggest that we assess and measure the long-term societal and economic impact of AI adoption in Global South? And what do you think what type of actionable recommendation can industry offer governments?
Yeah, thank you. I see we have 5 minutes and we have to go to the other panelists. Just very quick. So 3 aspects from Google to think about sort of global talent mobility and how we think about measuring the success. You talk about monitoring and evaluation. But I think number 1 is probably standardizing digital credentials. So we have what we call from Google side, Google Career Certificate. I don't know if you have any graduates of Google Career Certificate in this room. We have across the globe 1 million certificates issued. So you get trained, with the Google team, and then you get the certificate. And for example, in India, it is integrated into the Skill India digital hub. So I think that's a great way to encourage people to basically this is the latest technology that you can leverage for your career. And number two is, I will say, agile governance for skilling and keeping pace with what is the latest, like I talked about, the development and deployment of AI. And I cannot think of better example than this week, what's happening in Delhi. The world is watching what's happening out of India this week. So this is a very exciting moment. I think that's a great example. And number three is a bit of sort of regional mobility frameworks. I think one of the panelists talked about, inter-country, support and sharing knowledge is also crucial. So going back to the AVPN example, I think regionally to think about a bit of mutually recognized framework. So we don't just think about India. I think I think one of the panelists talked about how they are doing this in Singapore, right? In Japan, in Korea, and etc. So I think looking at it, sort of the broader region, that really helps us to stay focused on what's and how we can leverage the best that AI can offer.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I think there's a lot of lessons which a country like India can teach the world. There's a lot of talent. We keep talking about demographic dividend, which we obviously need to use. But that's something which we can teach the world and obviously learn from the world as well as to what's working in different parts of the globe as well. We're down to our last 3 minutes. What I'll do is I'll just go through the panel, ask you one thing which you think we should have solved by Feb 2027, 1 year from now, when the next similar session happens. I know Chenny said she doesn't know how the future will look like, but I'll go through that. But while I do that, while maybe you can think about it, I will want to obviously encourage everybody in the room, please download the toolkit, use it in your organizations, talk to your countries, figure out how you can deploy this, check out all the great work AVPN and the team is doing, look at what all the great work CSIS and Anjali and her team are doing in throughout the world, including how they are helping countries, companies upskill themselves. Look at all the work which Jenny talked about, Google certificates, for example, how all the great aspects of skilling initiatives Google is supporting throughout, not only for individuals, but also for enterprises. And also obviously from Angelica and her OECD team as to how they are bringing the best of knowledge from the global, not only global north, but across the world to all the talking about labor market as well. So maybe Nana, I'll start with you on what do you think, one thing which you think we should be doing by 2027?
So I think we should be looking at AI skilling with some careful research. I think every country right now talks about AI, and AI is something which brings in a lot of people. But AI is not firstly a fix for everything. We need to be clear what is it that we are going to try to solve, and then intelligently use that AI to solve it. So I feel like if we can do that, by 2027 February, we'd have made a huge sort of progress, especially in Asia, which is, got the advantage to try and really figure this out with research, with seeing what has worked and not worked in other parts of the world.
Anjali?
Great. I think that the labor mobility piece is going to be really important. So I'm hoping by next year this time, we're going to recognize that the labor workforce is going to be moving between informal and formal sectors. And how do we make sure that the AI literacy is portable as a result, addresses both sectors effectively?
Jenny?
Yeah, I want to introduce what's called Health Bunny by Google. So this is an AI-powered voice tool that democratizes medical information by communicating that information and knowledge in the native tongue, in different languages, right? So you don't have to be able to speak English to understand. It is bringing that information in your native tongue. And I want to go back to Anjali's point earlier. There's this amazing impact if you can access that information by voice. Not everybody has the luxury to open their laptop, have the desktop, or have the latest version of Pixel or iPhone. So I think that these voice models are really something that I'm very excited to continue to watch out for.
Yep. Angelica?
I would maybe say that I would like to see expanded certified micro-training on how to use AI in, say, top 50 jobs.
And also acceptable by employers, right? I forgot to say this, but if you don't know more about Access Partnership, please do also check us out as well. My wish for 2027, when I was looking at when we were planning this, was that we will have more women in our panel like this. But we already have a good thing, which is obviously houseful, which is I'm very happy to be the diversity candidate today. So thanks a lot, everyone, for your time, and I hope you enjoy the panel. Just on time.